1 week ago, as of my first putting pen to paper on this script, I released my first YouTube video, which I've been working on for the better part of 6 months, and the far worst part of 3.5 years. There's a little visual homage in that video, which I don't think anybody caught, and which in fairness I don't think anyone could be reasonably expected to. The very first frame is a near-perfect remake of the very first frame of Super Eye Patch Wolf's very first video. I was originally just going to use a screenshot of that frame, but his video was in 720p and I wanted mine to be in 1080, so I went to the trouble of recreating it as well as I possibly could. And while I was doing that, since I had the tab open, I thought, what the hell, let's stick it on for old time's sake. It's pretty good. It's not great. And I don't really want to get into all the reasons why, but what matters is that all of a sudden, I had a goal. If I accomplished nothing else, I wanted to be able to honestly say that my first video was better than the first video of my biggest inspiration. And having now finished that first video, it's impossible for me to say if I accomplished that goal or not. I mean, if you watch that video, you know I have a whole thing about the subjectivity of taste and no work of art being better than any other and blah blah blah. But even in the realm of personal opinion, I've been staring at the inner workings of my own creation for so long that it's impossible for me to regard it externally as a work of art at all. I guess it's pretty good though. Yeah, I think it's pretty good. However, 2015 Super Eye Patch Wolf is not the same as the Super Eye Patch Wolf of 2022. His most recent video about the mystifying online culture that's developed around Garfield the Orange Cat is tremendously in-depth and well-researched. You can feel the love and labor seeping out of every second of its damn near 80-minute runtime. How Mother 3 Breaks You is a thoughtful, truly beautiful look at a game that's been discussed to death and back on the internet already. The Space Jam 2 video is outstandingly creative, totally unlike anything Joho's ever done before, and watching it made me sincerely proud to call myself a longtime fan of his work. And like I said, it's inspiring, but at the same time, it can be a little daunting. Anyone who makes anything begins to have doubts about it at some point. And there was a point that came towards the end of the process, as they always do, where I started to wonder if there was room for me in the online analytical sphere. Super Eye Patch Wolf's work humbles me, and while I realize everybody starts somewhere, at times it's hard for me to imagine ever reaching a point where I have the ability to make something on the same level of quality as the bizarre modern reality of Sonic the Hedgehog. Tim Rogers of Action Button is bringing sprawling epics out into the world, employing effort and expertise on a level that I could never hope to attain, even if I had his years of experience in the field of finding weird stuff to save our video games. Hazel is a world's finest at cornering a weird niche subject and exploring it in subnautical depth, making the most shallow at glance subject matter utterly captivating for the length of one of her videos. And I have a decent amount of confidence in my ability to be both thoughtful and entertaining, but it's hard not to look at the wealth of talent on the platform right now and think, man, I don't know if I have a seat at this table. And right when these creeping insecurities were starting to really kick my ass, I saw a tweet. I don't remember what the tweet was, but I remember the display name of the person who tweeted it catching my attention. I don't remember exactly what that was either, but it said something like, video syncrasy. The video is done. I like videos, so I clicked on their profile, checked out their pinned tweet, and there it was. A 2-hour-long video ranking every single character in Danganronpa, Super Danganronpa 2, and Danganronpa V3 from worst to best. It's not inaccurate, but I don't think that description does this video justice. Like how Matthew Matosis's analytical material was eye-opening to me in terms of the landscape of possibilities of what YouTube videos talking about video games could be the first time I saw it, and then Brian David Gilbert's Unraveled series was eye-opening to me in the same way. Ranking the Danganronpa characters was eye-opening. I can't recommend this video enough. I thoroughly recommend you go watch it. Video syncrasy didn't inspire my first video. Their first video came out 2 weeks to the day before mine, which, as I mentioned, had an almost 6-month production schedule. But they most surely rejuvenated my desire to finish that video when I was most in need of some such rejuvenation. I was submerged in thoughts that everything that could be done within the video essay format had been done already, or at least was being done by people more qualified than I, and that anything I made was doomed to be yet more homogeneous sludge to add to an overflowing pile of, with a capital C, content. And video syncrasy showed me that not all the land had been tilled just yet. that there's so much more new ground to break. To me, the greatest draw of Idiosyncrasy's video is the construction of the video itself, rather than its exploration of the subject matter. Sprinkled throughout are these hand-drawn realizations of the characters from the series. That's a crazy amount of work. But the amount of work isn't even the most impressive thing. What I love is the utilization of the artwork. They're worked into visual gags, illustratory graphics, puzzle pages. It's clear that the end goal wasn't to go, look at these drawings I did. The art is a means to an end, and that end is relevant, engaging visual content. It's a whole zine's worth of work, all done by one person, and all in service of a greater overall narrative. I would have just put clips from the video game in here. This is insane! The visual gag density is at nigh on critical mass. The video's runtime says it's 2 hours, 1 minute and 16 seconds long, but I spent probably closer to 3 hours actually watching it the first time because I had to keep pausing, rewinding and replaying parts of it to catch everything. They edited in-game footage to make the characters say things that I don't think they would ordinarily say, and it's all funny. I wouldn't be talking this much about the strength of the visual gags if they weren't funny, but they are. The pausing, rewinding and replaying process is entirely worthwhile because the jokes land hard enough to make it worth your while. I don't know if that's the product of hours upon hours of early Simpsons-esque rewrites or if VS is just a naturally funny person. I don't really give a shit. It's funny because it's funny. To say one final thing about the visuals of Idiosyncrasy's video, they photoshopped all these parodified logos to represent each character. I would never have the skill or the eye for detail to make one of these, and they made almost 100. Thinking of a roughly relevant sight gag to attach to each character, and then taking the time to ever so closely recreate a Danganronpa-ized version of each one is just one more glimpse into the ocean of time and care that was so clearly put into this project. Idiosyncrasy mentioned on Twitter that they'll probably never put this amount of condensed effort into a video again, which I think is definitely a good thing. But as long as their future projects maintain even a hint of this visual identity, I'll watch everything they ever make, no matter what it's about. I don't want to get too specific, because the last thing I want to do is spoil the video for anyone. I really recommend you go watch it if you haven't, but it opens with a framing device that feels like it was designed to snare in me specifically. It's all at once a parody of typical YouTube conventions, a glimpse behind the curtain into the process that resulted in the creation of this video, and a glimpse behind another non-Euclidean curtain into what our reality could have looked like if this video was a worse version of itself. Somehow, the act of describing a video not made is so much more interesting than that video would have been if it did indeed exist. If you're confused by this description, good. I really don't want to give the game away here. Just go watch that like first minute and then proceed to watch the rest of it because you're immediately sold on Idiosyncrasy's entire lifetime body of work to come by its super strong opening notes. If you're at all familiar with my labyrinthine body of work, you know the idea of a YouTube video about itself is something I'm personally obsessively enamored with, and I find VidSyn's execution on that premise vastly more brain-catching than anything I've done so far myself. Also, check this out! They storyboarded this shit! I don't know if most of this introductory concept art was ever planned to really exist, but look how close they got their desk to looking like the storyboard panel here. That's fucking filmmaking, baby! Or maybe the desk already looked like that, and they drew a picture of the desk so they could make it look like the storyboard? Either way, that's great! Watching this video feels like cracking your skull open and feeding a 7-course meal directly into your brain, and then your brain grows a little mouth and it eats all the food. Look, 2 seconds later, let's fast forward 2 seconds. They created a physical copy of a book featuring art from in the video. Like, it's not actually physical. They digitally imposed the cover onto a different book, but you'd never know just by looking at it. I was staring at this for like literally like 10 minutes trying to figure out if it was real or not. It's like, but so the video is framed like it's a bunch of diagrams from children's books and newspaper comics and stuff, and that's a fun framing device. But then when you create a physical book in which all this stuff supposedly exists, it lends a whole new layer of like enrichment to the world the video creates. I just said the word enrichment because I don't think there is an adjective to describe the thing I'm feeling when I look at this. It just feels like the whole video and all its graphical and stylistic elements exist in their own world somehow. I don't know if this is going to be as cool to anyone else as it is to me, but it's really cool to me. Wow, yeah, this is a great video essay. Yeah, but I mean, I can't explain why it's cool, but it's cool, right? Yeah, whatever. This disclaimer is really good advice, by the way. You should watch the video once and just listen to the narration, otherwise it can be hard to take it all in because you're pausing it and rewinding it and not really listening to it because you're trying to read at the same time. And then the second time you watch it, you can pause it and try and catch all the freeze frame bonuses. It's totally worth it. You'll want to watch it twice because it's really good, but unless you don't like it as much as I did, in which case, you know, whatever. But I really liked it. I watched it 3 times. And the first time, I kept pausing it, and I missed a bunch of what VS was saying. And then the second time I watched it, because I was like, damn, I'd like that video. I want to watch that again. And I took in a lot more of what they were trying to communicate, because that time around, I'd already seen all the visual gags. I definitely watched it in the wrong order. You should watch it without pausing the first time, and then with pausing the second time. The third time I watched it was as research for this video. I'm actually in the process of watching it for the third time now as I'm typing this. But by the time you watch this, and you hear me say this, I will have finished watching it for the third time. Does that fuck with your head a little bit? Does that make your brain feel weird? The rest of the video is really good. VSync does a great job of explaining what Danganronpa is and what their reasoning behind each character placement was, and I can't exactly explain why their explanation is good. I feel like such a thing is self-explanatory. There is one more part of the video I really want to dig into though. When I first saw the video, I messaged my friend Stardy to tell him, you know, this is really good, this is unlike any YouTube video that's come before it and will strongly resemble every great YouTube video that comes after, you know, that kind of stuff. And Stardy messaged me back a little while later to go, yeah lad, now then lad, now then Study's northern, which is funny. Study messaged me back later to be like, did you reach the middle part? And when I said no, I paused it to go for a run, and then when I got back, my mom asked me if I wanted to watch Spider-Man 2, so I watched Spider-Man 2 with my mom. Study said, that middle part feels like the thing that would make you decide this was your favorite video ever. So, ranking the Danganronpa characters is 2 hours, 1 minute, and 17 seconds long. But only about 1 hour and 45 of those minutes are actually video syncrasy ranking the Danganronpa characters. As they explain in the video's midpoint intermission, people like long YouTube videos, and so in order to hit that 2 hour mark without padding things out with uninteresting, unnecessary fluff, Video Sins employs this one cool trick they don't want you to know.
It's called public domain footage. What's public domain footage, you ask? It's this.
This is genius. I don't even know if it can be described as a joke, but it had me losing it. I don't mean laughing, it had me losing my mind. This is postmodern. This is post-postmodern. It's unhinged. It's incredible. And the Popeye cartoon itself is really good too. I probably never would have watched this if it wasn't for this intermission, but I sat through the whole thing and then I dived right back into the ranking of kings. Sure, it might have quote-unquote interrupted the quote-unquote flow a little bit, but it's a long video. I had no objection to getting a little brain breather there in the middle. If you really want to keep your attention on the main course, it's easy enough to skip, but I sincerely think this mid-dinner dessert adds to the full experience, even if only for how unique it is. It's not only for how unique it is though. I sincerely had a great time watching this short. I've always liked the aesthetics of old cartoons. I was conceptually a fan of things like Popeye and Bessie Boop, but I was a fan from afar in a sense, never truly indulging that interest beyond that one Ghost Main music video or this character I made in Fire Pro Wrestling World. But thanks to VV Sizzle's sudden, unexpected encouragement, I finally sat my ass down and watched one of these cartoons I'd quote-unquote liked for such a long time. This particular feature is a really interesting initial introduction to the broader Popeye canon. As everyone knows, even a complete Popeye neophyte like myself, the typical format of a Popeye adventure circulates around Popeye involving himself in some manner of conflict with his nemesis Bluto. But in Popeye the Sailor meets Sindbad the Sailor, sailor, Bluto abdicates the role of antagonist in place of, Important to note, if you're trying and struggling to log this on Letterboxd, it is Sindbad, not Sinbad or Simbad. I always thought it was Simbad with an M, but I looked it up and I guess all three are used with roughly the same level of frequency. So Sindbad in this is visually near identical to Bluto, to an extent that could be considered lazy, but I actually really like it. It feels like the characters are putting on a stage play, and this time around Bluto is portraying a slightly different role than usual. It's a cool feeling, and a really interesting thing for any piece of animation to achieve. We'll get back to Sindbad in a minute, but on the subject of Bluto, as I dug a little deeper in my Popeye journey, I learned something I found quite interesting. I always assumed Popeye fans would be in firm support of Popeye himself, but in the same way you invariably start to root for Tom over Jerry, Bluto has his own fair share of supporters. Even though he's always the instigator of his and Popeye's troubles, even though he's cruel and underhanded, if you see a guy lose enough times, eventually you start to yearn for him to get that one long-awaited win. Vamos, los rudos. I can't roll my R's. I've always wanted to, but I've never been able to. It's been a minute, so we're getting back to Sindbad. No, we're not. Sindbad doesn't show up for the first minute of the cartoon, but that first minute is still great, so I want to talk about it. I'm lying. I mostly just want to talk about these animal noises. This shit is crazy. This is what a guy who heard of a lion for the first time in his life earlier that recording session from a secondhand account by a 2-year-old would do if you told him make a lion noise. I love the animal sounds in this. While I was watching it for the second time, I was mentally casting an imaginary fan dub performed by me and my friend group, and the entire reason I was doing that is because I heard this eagle screech.
Now there was a thrill I'd be sorry to miss.
That's the best. This guy doesn't know what a bird is, but he's having the time of his life. And look who it is, here's our guy. Before saying a word, Sindbad beats some animal ass, letting us know that, newsflash, we aren't supposed to sympathize with Sindbad the sailor, but then he opens his mouth and fuck, he's so cool though.
I'm Sindbad the sailor, so hardy and hale. I live on an island on the back of a whale. It's a whale of an island, that's not a bad joke. Its lord and its master is this handsome bloke.
Sindbad introduces himself in song form, which is a cool way of presenting a parallel between him and our hero Popeye. If you mention Popeye to most people, or at least most people over a certain age, the first thing they'll do is start singing the Popeye the Sailor Man song. This is Popeye's Virgil, right down to having his own song about being a sailor and being really strong. It's way more self-inflating than Popeye's, though. He goes on for like 3 whole minutes about all the ways he could kick your ass, and provides a catalog of all the different asses he's kicked instead of summing it up with a nice succinct fights to the finish because he eats spinach.
I clean out those serpents with one dirty look. The capture of Bulla for me was just fun. He took me in his feet, but I ran off with him.
The stuff he says isn't even my favorite part of Sindbad's song. Sindbad's song, in spite of how self-congratulatory and triumphant it is lyrically, is sung in minor key.
Oh, the most remarkable, extraordinary fellow. Sindbad the sailor. I'm afraid of nobody under the sun. All I say is, boom, my enemies run.
If you close your eyes and tune out the lyrics, it's still clear that this is an evil song sung by an evil man. A blind man who's never heard of Popeye and who doesn't speak a word of English will be able to tell you which song is the good guy's song and which is the song of the bad guy. So Sindbad's song is mostly basically about his main thing that he likes to do, which is sailing around the globe and beating animals up and then kidnapping them and then keeping them prisoner for decorative purposes and then making them sing about how cool he is. Some of them even have roughly human level intelligence, like this 2-headed, 2-eyed Cyclops. And here I'd like to mention something else I like about this cartoon. Unusually for the time, it isn't racist, it's just xenophobic.
Ah! Oh, the most phenomenal, extraordinary fellow.
Use! Sinlaus the sailor! Are you laughing at Stooges
According to Wikipedia, the Cyclopses are meant to be a reference to the Three Stooges, which I'm not so sure about considering A, there's only 2 of them, and B, they're some type of Eastern European? I think they're Russian, but I'm bad with accents. Ben, tell me which country these guys are supposed to come from. So yeah, they're funny, nincompoopish, probably Russians, but there aren't any caricaturish depictions of black guys or Asians in this short, which honestly is a real bullet dodged considering the premise of evil guy in the 1930s who sails around the world kidnapping sentient creatures he thinks look weird. I'm not trying to give the cartoon undue credit or anything. I'm not trying to be like, wow, inspiring. This piece of vintage 1930s animation managed to avoid being racist for 15 whole minutes. But if you're in any way interested in vintage animation and the frankly off-putting cultural standards of the time have been something putting you off from watching them, I'm happy to let you know this one's pretty much clean of anything like that, which might ruin it for you. In addition to not being racist, this cartoon does another cool thing. Check this out. There's this really beautiful technique Max Fleischer's studio innovated where they created these 3D backgrounds for the characters to move around in and then composited them together with the animation cells. The process is fascinating and it looks great. There's an excellent explainer by Ozark Howling Wolf, which goes into way more detail than I'm able to, which I'll link in the description below. I actually had an interesting experience with this technique just this week. When I first saw it, I thought, I've never seen anything like this before. It'd be cool if modern animation ever tried to tackle techniques like this. And then as soon as I'd finished that thought, a modern animation studio did. I've been watching the new Cuphead series on Netflix, and it's great, but after a few episodes, I realized something. When I was a kid, I'd catch old Loony Tunes and Tom and Jerry cartoons on Cartoon Network, so I recognized a lot of the references and techniques they're imitating in Cuphead's production. I'm watching it with my brother though, and he's 14, meaning he's on the very lowest end of kids who might have that background. Kids don't watch TV anymore. The convenience of being able to pick whichever show you want to watch at whichever given time has basically eliminated the experience of flicking through channels trying to find something to consume and settling on something that looks intriguingly different to what you're used to. The Cuphead Show is clearly primarily aimed at a younger audience than me and my brother, meaning it's being produced in the interest of an audience who you'd think wouldn't understand or nostalgize over one of the most crucial parts of its appeal. Somehow we all share this cultural notion of what old cartoons are like, though. It's become so deeply ingrained in modern society that it's sort of detached from the actual old cartoons themselves. So after we watched the 4th episode of Cuphead, I thought, man, I bet Ben's never seen some of the stuff being referenced here. I should force him to sit through that cool Popeye cartoon that was in the Danganronpa video. So that was the 3rd time I watched it, and Ben's big takeaway from it was the bird make a funny noise. But his second big takeaway was that thing with the 3D backgrounds was cool. And I was like, yeah man, that is cool. And then in the very next episode of Cuphead, they did the same thing. There's so much love put into that show. The animators do a really excellent job of using modern techniques to digitally simulate bred by necessity inventions of decades past. I don't want to get sidetracked here though. Let's get back to the matter at hand. So Sindbad's song is quite cleverly interrupted by another's.
Who's the most remarkable, extraordinary fellow?
It's Popeye the Sailor.
Worth remarking, this is one of the only Popeye cartoons I've seen, and I've seen more than a few now, which actually features sailing. Most of his adventures are entirely landlocked, but the first time we see Popeye this go around, he's happily sailing his boat with his 2 pals aboard. We're never told where they were going, and my initial inference was that they were simply off exploring on some sea-bound adventure. It really is difficult for me to imagine Popeye sailing somewhere specific with a set goal in mind, even in spite of him being predominantly identified as the sailor. So explicitly, Sindbad is pissed off at Popeye for singing his stupid song, but look how the visuals communicate his impression of one of the other characters on Popeye's vessel. We get this impressive panning point of view shot through the lens of Sindbad's telescope, letting the audience know how many adversaries our viewpoint character is being confronted with. But look at how it zooms in on Olive Oil and lingers on her beautiful sexual characteristics. Sindbad doesn't say, "I'm gonna fuck this," but we know. We know. A moment later, Sindbad makes his intentions clear.
Wreck that ship! But bring me the woman.
Look, the bird's in on it. He knows. He knows.
Go.
Dude, this show is so awesome. So the bird fucks the boat up and grabs Olive, and then Sindbad starts doing some of that classic 1930s sexual assault on her, but I love how active Olive is in trying to fight him off. This is clearly a damsel in distress story, but it's not like looming eventual danger. He doesn't just stick her in a tower and tell her, I'm gonna marry you in 3 days, so that's how long Popeye has to rescue you. He gets hold of her and straight away he's like, I'm gonna do stuff to you now, and she's immediately resisting him with everything in her power. I don't know, I like how active Olive is in this situation. She's a really cool character. She's very headstrong, very outspoken, very much not the typical image of what you'd expect a typical 1930s guy's idealized cartoon woman to be.
I love the kind of woman that can kick my ass.
I was researching this video and I found a really useful article. It was listed 13 interesting Popeye facts, and I learned a lot from reading it, but the guy who wrote it seemed to really have it out for Olive. Despite the anorexic looking Olive Oyl eventually becoming Popeye's girlfriend, in the Popeye comics and cartoons, Olive insults and berates Popeye regularly, is unfaithful routinely, and in general treats him like dirt. In more than one Popeye cartoon, Olive actually hits, strikes, and or beats the heck out of the luckless sailor. Despite this, and her lack of any sex appeal, Popeye's undying love for Olive Oyl persists throughout the sailor's career. This guy's out of his mind. Olive's great. One good thing the article mentioned, though, is Popeye's ad-libs. One of the most distinct things about the Popeye cartoon, something I've never seen anywhere else, is Popeye's own little running commentary track during his adventures.
I'm gonna take another look at that thing, see what that was. That's the biggest buzzard I ever saw. Look at that fellow go. Skin the one to drum, the beep, the bum, skin, skin the one to do, the in the line, everybody up. Ooh. I don't like this place at all. Sorry I ever came in here.
Unlike most cartoons, the animations for Popeye were completed first, and then they recorded voiceover while watching the cartoons back and trying to match up the voice lines with the lip flaps. This is uncommon because it's completely ridiculous and totally impractical, but it has a lot of comedic potential. This is demonstrated by Popeye and also by the Sonic the Hedgehog real-time fan dubs by Snapcube, which employ almost exactly the same technique. That's just a thought I had watching this. I just thought the similarity was interesting. Literally, that's the only other thing I can think of which features the same kind of audio recording process as the old Popeye. So the big difference is obviously that Popeye the Sailor was scripted, but Jack Mercer, the voice of Popeye at the time, would include his own little ad-libs during parts where Popeye wasn't supposed to be speaking. Basically his version of going, here's what I think my character's thinking. The ad-libs were so funny that they decided to include them in the finished cartoon, even though they didn't line up with Popeye's lip flaps. And now they're one of the most fondly remembered things about this era of Popeye. They're so iconic to the franchise that Robin Williams, in his performance as Popeye in the 1980 live-action movie, this performance is stellar. I don't care what you think of the film. In order to capture the character's essence, he ad-libbed a lot of dialogue too. And then, having filmed the movie, he had to re-record all those ad-libs because the on-set microphones didn't pick up his Popeye core muttering. This franchise has a truly fascinating legacy. I'd love to see somebody who knows more about it shine a brighter spotlight on it. Anyway, Wimpy's a fucking freak. He has a meat grinder he keeps on his person at all times. And he gets removed from the plot for a while because he sees a live duck and goes, ah, there's my lunch, and tries to feed it into the meat grinder whole while it's still alive. This guy's insane. This is so evil. This is worse than anything Sindbad does in the whole movie. So Popeye goes forth on his adventure, and man, Popeye is such a beast. He doesn't even need this finish. He's just cool. Look, he does a drill attack like Rouge the Bat through this wall. He didn't even need the spinach. Popeye would fuck you up. He doesn't even need the spinach. Blitzo's being cool again. He's done trying to like kiss Olive and stuff, and now he's just firing a gun at her and making her do a dance. This is so cool. This is the coolest thing you can do with a woman you kidnapped. The flow of action in this next scene is unbelievable. In like one uninterrupted sequence, Popeye walks into frame, Olive tries to run to him, Bluto trips her, Bluto catches her, Bluto gives her the golden arm bomber, Bluto and Popeye square up, and then before they can do anything, Wimpy enters stage left, still trying to mutilate this duck. Get this guy the fuck out of here! I hate this guy! The duck eats his last hamburger. I'm happy about that. You had that this whole time! Why were you trying to mince a duck? You had a hamburger! Wimpy doesn't do anything. We cut away from him and cut back to Popeye and Sindbad, and it's back to business. That entire sequence pre-Wimpy is so crazy. I rewound it and watched it like 3 or 4 times just now, trying to focus on a different part each time, because each character is in constant motion, constantly reacting to everything that everybody else is doing. Nobody ever just idles out. It's impossible to take everything in just one viewing, but they didn't skimp out on any of the animation. It's rich enough that you get the full story wherever you choose to place your eye. Just incredible levels of labor and care for detail. This shot alone tells you just how passionate the team were about making the best feature they possibly could. This next part is also great. We're again kind of struck by the contrast between these two characters, this time in terms of essentially their social standing. Sindbad goes, "Who are you?" And Popeye goes, "I'm Popeye the Sailor Man." Just one man doing a little song and a little dance. He's our guy. He is the working class hero. No advantages, just his own 2 hands, but he's still gonna do what he's gotta do. By contrast, Popeye goes, "Who are you?" And Sindbad goes, "Who am I?" And instead of answering the question, he gets his whole menagerie of captives to answer for him.
Who's the most phenomenal, extra special kind of fellow?
We fucking love you, Sindbad, you're the best! He has the home field advantage here. He's fighting on his own island that he owns, and he has the support of the fans behind him. Doesn't matter. Popeye's still gonna do his best, because that's what a man's gotta do. Popeye shows he's not intimidated, and in retaliation, Sindbad does a fucking stage fatality on him. He launches him into the bird, and then the bird catches him and carries him to an adjacent island, and the next thing we see is a volcanic eruption. Popeye's dead. No, he's not. Popeye kills that motherfucker effortlessly, and then runs back across the surface of the ocean to feed him to Sindbad. This is cool for establishing Popeye's power level. We're introduced to the idea that he's capable of winning a fight against such a fearsome creature, in spite of such incredible odds being stacked against him, but it happens off screen, meaning we don't actually get to see the fighting techniques that scored him such a victory. It's tantalizing. Now we know Popeye has demon strength, and we're glued to the screen in the hopes of seeing him use it to take care of Sindbad, and we will not be disappointed, my friends. Oh no. So Sindbad kind of approaches this fight like he's a video game boss. He's the strongest guy, but he doesn't really want to deal with Popeye himself, either due to laziness, maybe he thinks Popeye is beneath him and not worth the effort, or maybe because on some level he's intimidated. He's afraid that Popeye actually does have the strength to defeat him, and he's employing contingency tactics to avoid giving Popeye the chance. Any of these interpretations are valid. There's enough evidence included in the text to lend credence to any of these readings. But for whatever reason, Bluto decides that rather than fighting Popeye himself, he wants to get one of his minions to kill Popeye instead. The bird doesn't work, so he pawns him off on minion number 2, his second in command, his Kabuto, if you will, his Ichimaru Gin, if you will. It's the Cyclops guy. This guy is tough. He kind of fucks Popeye up a little bit. I like how when he's robbing him of his dignity and treating Popeye like a fucking baby, while one head sings a lullaby, the other head is like a-cappellaing the instrumentalization in the background.
Comfort to sleep, my baby kid, my peaches and cream, my baby kid. If you don't sleep, my baby kid, I close for you your 2 eyes like this. Yeah.
I didn't catch that until now. That's cool. This fight is so good. The Cyclops is a flawed character, and he's well written because his flaws drive the plot forward. He's strong, but his weakness is that the 2 heads can't get along, and so they're compromised when they stop fighting Popeye and start fighting each other. Compare and contrast with Heroes Eventually Die, the tag team of Tommy End, now Malachi Black, and Chris Hero from Gabe Sapolsky's Evolve. Individually, 2 of the strongest wrestlers within WWN canon, but balanced by the fact that their individual pride serves as an impediment to their ability to work together. So while they're distracted, Popeye capitalizes on the advantage afforded to him and fucks them up with his advanced fighting techniques. He Goomba stomps their both feet, and when they retaliate by throwing him into a tree, he quickly and carefully modifies the parabolic arc of his trajectory, so the tree falls and lands on 50% of the Cyclops' heads. I just love this part. And then look at this shit! This is a horrific kill move! This is like something out of the Raid. This would be illegal in the UFC. Popeye immediately ends this fight. 10-0 from all 3 judges. Cyclops is immediately rushed to an urgent care facility to try and prevent life-altering complications. Popeye didn't have to do him like that. Popeye, why? Here we go. So Sindbad's pissed now. Sindbad stances up. Popeye stances up. It's time for the main event. I love how they end up in this part of the island that looks like an arena, and then all the stands fill up with these wide-eyed animals. They want to see the fight just as badly as we do. Things Things escalate quickly. Sindbad starts out trying to intimidate Popeye, of course to no avail, and then he picks him up and tries to squeeze him to death. There's a great visual gag here. Popeye turns beet red, and that's followed by my favorite line in the whole thing.
Beat for beat, kiddo. That's what I got.
This is great. If it's an improvisation, it's great. If it's in the script, it's great. It's just great. So Sindbad maintains the offensive with his superior grappling. Popeye starts playing the shell game. We get another great visual gag with Popeye scoring a bullseye. And then Sindbad changes tack and just starts fucking him up. Look at this. This looks almost identical to the Star Platinum Punch Rush from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Heritage for the Future on the PS1. It's so strikingly similar, I almost feel like this cartoon had to have had some kind of influence on Hirohiko Araki during his conceptualization of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and indeed on Yoshiyuki Okumura during his conceptualization of Fist of the North Star, itself Araki's most glaring influence. Sindbad keeps fucking him up, and Popeye goes for Old Reliable, the can of spinach, but Sindbad smartly interrupts him and knocks the can out of Popeye's hand. FromSoft PvP 101, don't let him pop that Estes flask unpunished. This is cool though, it adds an extra element of tension to the world famous formula of Popeye popping spinach and automatically winning. In the end, he's only able to secure victory by firing the Chekhov's gun at that funny little stick thing he keeps in his mouth all the time. He hooks it on a tree branch to free up his hand so he can open up the spinach can. It's a tiny little detail, but it's smart how he switches back to using his hand to hold onto the tree so he's able to chew without letting go of the branch. Just good, nuanced stuff. People notice stuff like that. Now, watch him kill this guy. After using Sindbad's beaten body to hoist his own flag and lay claim to his island home, Popeye steals Sindbad's self-inflating song to sing about himself, and Sindbad's captives sing along.
Who's the most remarkable, extraordinary fella?
This is the most absolute victory I have ever seen. Cool cartoon. The rest of the video syncrasy video is good. Not much to say about it that I haven't said already, but I particularly like the Kokichi Oma section. I really like how it focuses on the character from one specific angle and then uses that approach to dig deeper into his characterization from a number of different directions. Somebody said they thought this part was too long, but I honestly would have loved it if more of the characters had this kind of focus placed upon them. Though obviously I understand why that wasn't feasible, both from a production time standpoint and from the perspective of not wanting the video to be like Action Button Reviews Cyberpunk 2077 length. What there is sublime. It's my current favorite piece of online media to come out of 2022. Anyway, here's my list.
The most remarkable, extraordinary fellow.